Have you ever been in a situation where you have been so close to breakthrough, where you thought this was your big moment, and then come to find out the door closed, and now you're looking at a door that's not open, but it's closed of failure? Well, in this video, I'm going to give you insight from Genesis, letting you know that that beginning you thought was on the way to success may need to end for something bigger down the road. But before we get down to the nitty gritty, hit the like and subscribe button so men looking to find their prosperity through God can find this channel. Now, I was listening to this song called In the Beginning, and it's by Joe Keery. I think that's his last name, if I'm saying it correctly. He's a cast member of Stranger Things, because I was watching Stranger Things getting ready for the final season to come on Netflix. And the song was provoking, and it made me think about closed doors unexpectedly. So let's talk about Joseph in the Bible, because a lot of times we think that closed doors mean that we fail, but some doors are meant to close because they were used as a sharpening tool, as teachable moments for your eventual door, for your eventual harvest. And Joseph is a Bible figure in Genesis that exemplifies in the beginnings. He was Jacob's favorite son, and Jacob gave him a coat of many colors. And Joseph's other brothers were jealous and mad that he got that. That coat symbolized blessings. And Joseph also had a dream. God gave him the gift of dream. I mean, God spoke to him in dreams and gave him the gift of interpretation. And Joseph told his brothers and dad, like, hey, and I saw that you guys would be bound down to me. And the brother was like, you need to slow down, because I don't know what you're talking about. His brothers, after he got that coat, his brothers schemed to get him in, schemed to kill him. And while he was in the pit, thankfully, one of the brothers was like, no, we can't do this. And they sold him to slavery. So that was the first end of his beginning, where he got the coat of many colors, was favored by his dad, but then sold to slavery. Has it happened to you where you feel like this is it, this has to be it, and then something takes you away? I felt that so many times. When Joseph then goes into slavery, he's sold to an Egyptian guard, a high-ranking guard, and things are going well. God's favor is on Joseph, so much so that the Egyptian high-ranking official puts Joseph over everything among his house. But there was one problem. Potiphar's wife was after Joseph. Joseph kept turning her down, said, how can I do that against God and against your husband? He kept declining, kept running. She kept pursuing, so much so is that there was nobody in the house, and she thought this was her breakthrough to get Joseph. Being in mind, Joseph was focused on providing value for his master at the time. Potiphar's wife tries to seduce him. She grabs him, tears away. Then she's left with the cloth and disappointment of not getting her way. Joseph runs away from her, and she uses that cloth to accuse him of trying to take advantage of her. As any husband, he listened to his wife, and now Joseph, who was now have found favor, God had favored him in an unlikely situation, that beginning now end. Now he was in jail. So you look at his story where he's favored by his dad, so much so that his brothers knew that he was kind of the dad's favorite. They sell him to slavery after he gets the coat of many colors. He's picked up by a high-ranking official in Egypt, the that official's wife accuses him of trying to take advantage of her after he's been set over the house. He didn't do anything wrong. And now he's in jail. So there's been two doors, two ends to beginnings that he didn't see coming and he didn't even ask for. Okay? He literally was dealing with these lemons and making lemonade, and then somebody was like, nope, come on. So you may be feeling in your spirit it's waning. You're losing hope. You're losing faith, especially as a man. As men, we go through a lot of things. I've been in situations where I've had to think how I'm going to provide this month. I've been in situations where, man, I'm doing everything right, and now my child's not listening to me a little bit like I want them to. Have you been in those situations before? Are you currently in a situation where you doing well, but something hit you upside the head like, nope, you got to deal with that now? Well, this was Joseph in the Bible. So God favors him again. God's favor was on Joseph's life. So much so, the warden saw it, and the warden puts Joseph over all the inmates in jail. So Joseph, wherever he went, saw favor. Okay? Now, this is interesting because God talked to Joseph through dreams, through visions. And we had two employees of the Pharaoh come in. All right? Both of them had visions. Joseph asked, they talked to Joseph. Joseph asked God to help him interpret it. He interpreted. One was going to go back to work and the other was going to get his head cut off. Imagine being in a situation where you're like, yeah, tell me what this means. And he's like, what? That would, I'd be like, nah, you don't know what you're talking about personally. But the one that went back to work for the Pharaoh, Joseph said, don't forget me. You've been in that situation before where you helping somebody out. Like, hey, look out for me, big dog. No. And you thought that by you providing value, that person was going to open a door. But like I said in previous videos, God always says in due season. And if you remember, the reason why the channel is called Seeds, because I want to remind you that things happen in due season. It has its time. And I'll get to that with Joseph because there's a reason why he had to go to Egypt. So years go by, and guess who has a dream? Pharaoh. Okay? So I'm going to take you back to what's going on. He was sold into slavery. He was now put in jail. He interpreted a dream. And now he was expecting a breakthrough at that moment. Once he did that, but he still had to wait. And now that he waited, Pharaoh had a dream. Look how God's working for him. The person that Joseph interpreted that went back to work for Pharaoh told Pharaoh that he knew somebody in jail that could interpret his dream. Joseph. Joseph goes to tell Pharaoh, letting him know that God will let him know what the dream was about. And the dream was basically about 7 years of abundance and 7 years of famine. And the Pharaoh saw that the light and the favor of God was on Joseph. And immediately, after all this time passed, he appoints Joseph as a prime minister of Egypt. So let's walk it back, because sometimes we look forward on where we thought we should have been, which presents us in a gap, instead of looking back to see how far we come. Now, don't let me get it confused. I don't want to go to jail and I don't want to be accused. Okay? But let's take from the mindset of just looking at Joseph's story. You get something from your father that's a blessing. That door closes. But that door was used to move him. He was sold to slavery. He's in Potiphar's house. That door was closed after he rose up. It was used to move him. And you're looking like, why you move him in jail? But he was moved to jail to interpret the person who was eventually going to open the door to Pharaoh. Because God, when God has set Abraham apart, he prophesied to him that his descendants will be in a foreign land, accumulating, building before they go out into the promised land, because it wasn't yet time. It's always a set time with God. His time is always going to be better than our time. It may be something tough as a man to hear, as a believer in God, but his time, he knows the right time to maximize the fruitfulness of what he's trying to give you. So this was a prophecy that Joseph didn't even know he was a part of, because when Joseph goes to be the prime minister of Egypt, what happens is that after the 7 years of abundance, they now have 7 years in famine. And guess who's able to come to Egypt during the famine? Joseph's family. So the 12 tribes, okay, that came from the 12 sons of Jacob, they grew in Egypt. Joseph was the reason why. And look how God works. That Pharaoh showed Joseph so much favor that his family and his brothers were able to live in peace. Now, of course, transition happened where a new Pharaoh came in, and that's another story for another day. But that's another end to beginning, because that Pharaoh had to come to exit them to go to the promised land. One of the principles that I want to share with you today is that whenever there's an exit, there's always an entrance that's going to happen. Every time Joseph exited, he always entered a new season. And as you're thinking about your situation, this situation, as you trusting God, obeying him, in the Bible it talks about he pays attention to need. He's a provider. He's a Jehovah Jireh. Okay? Think about that God is preparing you for your ultimate destiny, for your true calling. You're not going to, we see in part for a reason. I'm going to be honest. There's some things that have happened in my life that if I had known, I probably wouldn't have want to go through. I wouldn't even be standing here for you today. After I lost my sister, one of our siblings, I didn't even understand how far away I was from God, how much I didn't know of him. I wasn't even reading the Bible at that time in about 2016. But through that, I found my way to God. And that sorrow was used to exit out me of doing ungodly things and help me enter into God's way. It allowed me to start searching for him, to start reading his word, to start meditating on it, to start obeying it, to switch my perspective on what my heart was set on and where my mind was set on. It eventually gave me the building principles of what prosperity means. To stop doing ungodly things. To start obeying and meditating on his word. I started to understand that prosperity was a byproduct of you just going after God. All in on him. And as a man, this is going to set the foundation for your family. Does it mean that it absolves you from tough times? No. That's why we have these scriptures. And the Bible talks about all scripture is inspired by God and all scripture is profitable. So that lets you know that everything can be used for gaining. If you look in the Bible, you're not going to go scot-free. You're not going to have a clean life where there's no valleys and you're just going to live on the hill. Like, no, that's not how it works. So let's recap, okay? Remember, whenever God uses situations to push you to eventual calling, whenever there's an abrupt exit, it's because that's what he wanted. And that exit, take the teachable lessons from that exit from where you're entering to. Because as you exit, you'll always enter. As you exit, you'll always enter into your eventual calling. And those exits sharpen you for where you're going. Remember, the end is to the end of the old version of you. And your new beginning requires a new version. Until then, talk to you soon.